Have you ever been around someone who, within just 5 minutes, left you feeling emotionally drained? It's not that they shouted, insulted, or acted out. Sometimes it's far more subtle. A heavy silence, a passive-aggressive tone, or an endless stream of complaints that wrap around your mind like fog. You leave the interaction confused, tense, and a little more tired than before. And yet you hesitate to label it as toxic because it doesn't look like abuse. This isn't about being dramatic, sensitive, or too emotional. It's about recognizing that our emotional space is real, and like any physical space, it deserves boundaries and care. There are people in our lives, coworkers, friends, even family, who often unintentionally consume our energy without giving anything back. And the worst part, many of us were raised to tolerate it. We were taught that kindness means being available all the time, that compassion means endless patience, and that walking away makes us selfish. But here's the truth I've come to understand. Walking away from someone who drains your energy is not selfish, it's self-respect. You are not obligated to remain in spaces that exhaust your spirit. You don't have to explain your fatigue to those who never ask how you're doing. You don't need to shrink yourself to accommodate someone else's chaos. This conversation isn't about labeling others as villains. It's about finally recognizing what you feel and honoring that feeling. Because emotional fatigue is not invisible. Over time, it builds, it lingers, and it changes how we show up in life. So maybe it's time to stop asking, why am I so tired all the time? And instead ask, who around me is always taking and never giving? Not every relationship needs to be permanent. And not every connection is worth preserving at the cost of your peace. Clear distinction who really drains your energy? It's a common misconception that anyone who makes us feel sad or uncomfortable is automatically negative or toxic. As a woman learning to navigate complex emotional landscapes, I've come to understand that this is an oversimplification, and that distinguishing between different types of interactions can profoundly affect how we protect our energy and maintain emotional well-being. Not every uncomfortable moment means you're dealing with an energy-draining person. Sometimes it's an honest reflection or a call for growth. Understanding these differences helps us maintain clarity and emotional boundaries without shutting down genuine connections. 1. Not everyone who makes you feel sad is negative. First, let's explore the difference between someone who offers frank, sometimes uncomfortable feedback, and someone who constantly criticizes or judges you from the core. The two may appear similar on the surface, they both might cause discomfort, but their intentions and effects are very different. A person who provides straightforward feedback, even if it stings a little, is often motivated by care or desire for your improvement. Their words might challenge your assumptions or point out flaws you didn't want to face, but this kind of honest exchange encourages growth. It invites reflection, not resentment. For example, a colleague or friend might say, I noticed you struggled with that project. Maybe we can work on time management together. It's direct, but it's constructive and rooted in support. Contrast this with someone who habitually finds fault in everything you do, dismissing your efforts and defining you by your mistakes. This person's comments don't aim to uplift or help, but rather to undermine or diminish your self-worth. They might say things like, you never get anything right, or you're just not capable. Such relentless judgment is draining, and it chips away at your confidence. Recognizing this difference is crucial. One is a mirror held up to your growth areas, the other a tool used to tear you down. Similarly, when someone is in need of help, it's natural to feel compassion and want to offer support. But there's a difference between someone who reaches out for assistance and someone who consistently shifts the responsibility of managing their emotions onto you. The former acknowledges their struggles and takes steps to cope, while the latter expects you to carry the weight of their emotional burdens indefinitely. This emotional offloading can feel suffocating. When a person relies on you to regulate their feelings, it drains your energy and leaves little space for your own needs. Healthy relationships involve a balance where both parties support each other without either one becoming an emotional caretaker at the expense of their own well-being. 2. Signs of energy-draining people. How can you tell when someone is genuinely draining your emotional energy? There are several clear signs to watch for. feeling exhausted and anxious after interaction. If you often end conversations feeling depleted, confused, or worrying without clear reason, it's a warning sign. These feelings usually indicate that the exchange was emotionally taxing rather than mutually nourishing. Use of sarcasm, manipulation, or emotional gaslighting. Some people subtly or overtly use language that undermines your perception of reality or your feelings. This might look like sarcasm meant to belittle, or more complex emotional manipulation that makes you question your own memories or emotions. This behavior creates confusion and self-doubt, which can erode your mental health over time. Pressure to earn approval or validation. Do you feel like you have to jump through hoops, change yourself, or constantly prove your worth to this person? When someone makes you feel that your value is conditional on meeting their expectations, it drains your sense of authenticity and joy. Relationships should inspire you to be your best self, not a version you think will be accepted. One-sided emotional sharing. A relationship should ideally be a two-way street. When someone never asks how you are or shows interest in your feelings, but instead only vents their frustrations or sadness, it becomes emotionally imbalanced. Over time, this dynamic leaves you feeling unheard and overwhelmed, as if you're an emotional dumping ground rather than a partner or friend. As a woman, it can be especially challenging to set boundaries with such individuals. Social conditioning often encourages us to be nurturing, patient, and forgiving. However, self-care sometimes means stepping back from those who consistently drain your spirit. Protecting your emotional space is an act of strength and self-respect. Not every uncomfortable interaction signals a harmful relationship. Sometimes, honest feedback or emotional support requests are opportunities for connection and growth. However, it's essential to recognize when the pattern shifts toward persistent criticism, emotional dumping, manipulation, or conditional approval, because these are signs of energy drainers. By learning to identify these signs, you empower yourself to make informed decisions about who deserves your time and emotional investment. Setting boundaries doesn't mean shutting people out. It means choosing relationships that uplift, challenge constructively, and respect your emotional well-being. Ultimately, protecting your energy isn't about blame or avoidance. It's about respect both for yourself and for the people you allow into your inner circle. It's a balance of compassion and wisdom, a practice that helps you thrive as a thoughtful, self-aware woman in a complex world. 2. Understanding the mechanism. Why is IT so hard to walk away? One of the most challenging aspects of protecting our emotional well-being is the struggle to distance ourselves from people who drain our energy. Even when we recognize the negative impact, we often hesitate to set boundaries or walk away. Understanding why this happens can help us approach the situation with more compassion for ourselves and ultimately with greater clarity. 1. The guilt of being kind versus enduring too much. Many of us grow up believing that kindness means never abandoning others, especially those who seem to depend on us emotionally. This belief often blurs the line between being genuinely kind and simply tolerating behaviors that harm our spirit. It's common to feel guilt or discomfort at the thought of refusing someone who continually unloads their emotional burdens on us. For example, imagine a close friend who regularly vents their frustrations and anxieties, turning to you as their emotional support. You care deeply and don't want to be the bad person who refuses to listen, so you stay silent and absorb their negativity. Over time, however, this can leave you feeling emotionally exhausted and overwhelmed. The kindness you extended starts to feel like a heavy burden. Recognizing that being kind doesn't require sacrificing your own peace is a crucial step in breaking this cycle. 2. Emotional dependency and the rescuer role. Another reason it's hard to step away is the emotional dependency that develops for both sides. Especially among women, there can be a powerful urge to play the role of the rescuer or fixer, believing that if we are patient and good enough, the other person will change for the better. This belief is both noble and exhausting. We tell ourselves, if I'm supportive enough, they will grow or heal. Unfortunately, this isn't how change works. People change only when they choose to, not when we endure their behavior long enough. Holding on to the hope that our efforts will eventually transform the situation can trap us in a cycle of self-sacrifice without progress. Understanding this frees us from unrealistic expectations and helps you focus on what we can control, our own boundaries and well-being. It's okay to care deeply and still decide that protecting your emotional health means stepping back. 3. Common types of energy-draining people and how to recognize them. In adult relationships, it's inevitable that we will encounter people who challenge our emotional resilience. Yet, some individuals consistently wear us down more than others, subtly eroding our energy and peace of mind. Recognizing the different types of energy drainers can empower us to protect our well-being more effectively. Here are some common patterns to watch out for, illustrated by relatable, everyday examples. 1. The perpetual victim. This person seems to attract misfortune wherever they go. From minor setbacks to major challenges, their life feels like a series of unfortunate events. What makes the dynamic difficult is their refusal to take responsibility for their role in these situations. Instead, they cast themselves as the eternal victim, expecting others to fix or rescue them. For instance, imagine a colleague who is always complaining about how unfairly they are treated at work, but never takes any steps to improve their situation. When you try to offer advice or suggest solutions, they dismiss it or turn the conversation back to how hard their life is. Engaging with them often means getting pulled into their emotional whirlpool, leaving you feeling drained without any resolution. This dynamic can be particularly taxing because it invites sympathy but rarely encourages change. You may find yourself constantly supporting them emotionally, yet the cycle repeats endlessly. Recognizing this pattern helps you set clear boundaries instead of getting lost in their struggles. The sweet talker with a hidden edge. Some people have a knack for sounding polite and considerate, yet their words often carry an undercurrent that chips away at your confidence. They might compliment you superficially but include subtle criticisms or comparisons that make you question your worth. Consider a friend who frequently says things like, "You're really trying hard, but maybe you should rethink your approach," or "It's great that you're ambitious," though it's not everyone's cup of tea. On the surface, these comments seem harmless or even helpful. However, over time, they plant seeds of doubt and make you feel you're never quite good enough. This type of interaction can be confusing because the tone is gentle, but the effect is damaging. The key is to notice how you feel after such exchanges. If you often leave conversations feeling small or uncertain, it may be a sign that the kindness you receive is conditional or insincere. 3. The emotion denier. This individual struggles to acknowledge or validate your feelings. When you open up about your experiences, they respond with minimization or dismissal, making you feel unheard and isolated. For example, when you share that you're stressed about a deadline or upset about a conflict, they might say, "Oh, it's not a big deal," or "You're overreacting." Their intention may not be to hurt, but the effect is that your emotions feel invalidated, and you hesitate to express yourself fully around them. This type of dynamic can erode your emotional safety, as you start to doubt whether your feelings are legitimate. Recognizing the emotion denier is important because everyone deserves to be heard and understood, not dismissed. 4. The one who requires you to be on. Some people make you feel that being around them requires constant self-monitoring and emotional control. Instead of allowing you to be your authentic self, they expect you to manage their moods, avoid triggering their anger or disappointment, and maintain a perfect persona. Imagine a partner or friend who reacts sharply if you show frustration or vulnerability, prompting you to suppress your feelings and walk on eggshells. The energy spent controlling your behavior to keep the peace can be exhausting and prevent genuine connection. This dynamic often leaves you feeling tense and guarded, as if you're performing rather than relaxing in the relationship. Noticing this pattern can motivate you to seek relationships where you can be accepted as you are, without fear of judgment or reprisal. Recognizing these types of energy-draining behaviors in others isn't about labeling people as bad or toxic. Rather, it's about understanding how certain interactions affect your emotional health and learning to protect yourself accordingly. As a woman navigating adult relationships, it's essential to maintain clear boundaries and prioritize your well-being, even when empathy and care compel you to stay. By Identifying these patterns, the perpetual victim, the sweet talker with hidden criticism, the emotion denier, and the one who demands constant emotional control, you gain the clarity needed to make conscious choices about who deserves your time and energy. Ultimately, avoiding energy drainers is not selfish. It's an act of self-respect and a foundation for healthier, more fulfilling connections. For what to do when you have to live or work with them. In an ideal world, we would always have the freedom to choose the people we surround ourselves with. But real life isn't always so simple. Sometimes we find ourselves working alongside or even living with people who drain our emotional energy. When creating distance isn't an immediate option, how do we protect our peace while remaining respectful and grounded? One of the most powerful first steps is asking yourself a simple but revealing question. Are they taking responsibility for themselves? This question shifts your focus away from trying to fix the other person and back to what is within your control, your response, your energy, and your boundaries. Some people vent, complain, or lean heavily on others emotionally. That in itself isn't wrong. We all need support from time to time. But when someone repeatedly unloads their emotions on you without ever trying to reflect or grow from their situation, it becomes an imbalance. If their pattern remains the same, no matter how often you listen or advise, it's worth asking whether they are genuinely engaging with their own responsibilities or simply expecting others to carry the weight for them. The next step is to shift from reaction to observation. Rather than immediately responding emotionally to their words or behavior, practice noticing. Observe the patterns. Ask yourself, what usually happens when I engage in this dynamic? Observation helps you see clearly without being caught in the storm. It builds awareness, and with awareness comes choice. From this space of clarity, you can begin to create emotional distance. This doesn't necessarily mean cutting someone out of your life. In fact, it often doesn't need to be so drastic. Emotional distance is about reclaiming your power to respond on your own terms. You don't owe anyone an instant reply. You don't have to always be available. You are allowed to pause before responding, and in that pause, you reclaim your calm. For instance, if someone messages you in distress, but you're feeling depleted, you're allowed to wait. You're allowed to say, I hear that this is hard for you, but I don't have the energy to be fully present for this right now. This isn't cold or uncaring, it's honest, and it honors both your limits and the integrity of the relationship. Being honest about your capacity allows you to show up more authentically when you do have the energy. It's also okay to reframe your interactions with them. Not every emotional conversation has to be absorbed or solved. You can listen without taking on their feelings. You can empathize without agreeing. And sometimes you can walk away not out of spite, but out of self-respect. One key realization I've had, especially as a woman who used to feel responsible for everyone's comfort, is this. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. And I get to choose when, how, and to whom I open them. Just because someone is in your space, a coworker, a family member, a roommate, doesn't mean they're entitled to every corner of your emotional energy. The truth is, maintaining peace in challenging relationships doesn't require confrontation. It requires clarity. It's the quiet decision to preserve your energy. It's the gentle no that says, not right now. And it's the trust that you can still be kind without being consumed. In time, this practice teaches you not only how to protect yourself, but how to relate to others from a healthier, more empowered place. Not with resentment, not with judgment, but with firm, graceful boundaries. The true freedom comes from boundaries, not from pleasing. One of the most liberating realizations in adulthood is that we don't need to be the nicest person in everyone's eyes. Instead, we need to be the most honest person with ourselves. For a long time, I believed that being kind meant always saying yes, always showing up, always being available. But I've come to see that real kindness starts with clarity. And sometimes that clarity leads us to distance ourselves from certain people, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you wish harm upon others. It simply means you are finally choosing to protect your own emotional clarity, joy, and strength. When someone repeatedly drains your energy or crosses your limits, stepping back is not an act of cruelty. It's an act of maturity. You are saying, I value my well-being too much to keep sacrificing it. Too often, we equate emotional distance with rejection. But choosing space is not rejection, it's self-preservation. And it's okay to protect your peace even if it disappoints others. You are not responsible for how everyone feels, but you are responsible for how you care for yourself. In the end, personal freedom is not about how well we please others, it's about how bravely we define and defend our boundaries. Because when you stop trying to be everything for everyone, you finally have the energy to be true to yourself. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.